LaTishia is an Albemarle County principal at Stony, is it Stone Robinson or Stony Point? You're at Stony Point, LaTishia? Okay, very good. We also have with us Juandiego Wade, who is on the Charlottesville City School Board, and also Shawn Mulligan, who is an architect with VMDO and Associates. So we'll give them a second to say hi, and we'll go ahead and get started with some of the questions that we have. A loose agenda for today. I have some prepared questions that we'll talk to the panelists about, and then Andrea will be monitoring our Q&A, and we'll have some time for that hopefully at the end.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm glad to participate today.
Thanks for joining us. Juan?
Thank you. My name is Juandiego Wade, and I went through Leadership Charlottesville in 1991. I think I just want to add that as you were giving shouts out to your fellow classmates from your graduating class in 1991, when I went through, we had a young man who was with Centel telephone company, and he said that at the time that in 20 years everyone would have a cell phone and landlines would be almost obsolete. And I remember laughing at him. And so here we are now with technology and things change. And so I want to give it a shout out to my LC graduates if any of them are on the line. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. Shawn?
Hi, I'm Shawn Mulligan. As Natasha said, I'm an architect with VMDO Architects. I'm in the K-12 studio. So we design pre-K through 12th grade schools. For those of you who don't know about VMDO, we're an architecture firm here in Charlottesville and DC, specialize in education and designing for athletics and community. So any place that people can come together and make their community stronger. And I am a proud graduate of LC19. I see some of my colleagues and classmates here, Scott Hamler, Natasha. So I'm a big fan of this organization and Scott, sorry, Scott. And I'm
Lucas,
super excited.
Lucas is on the phone. Lucas on the phone.
There he is. All right.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. So really just wanted to start off, talking a little bit about the decisions around going back to school, some of the thought process that went into that. I know all of us probably have our own thoughts about which side of the fence we're on when it comes to kids going back to school. But Juan, I'd like to start with you as a member of the Charlottesville School Board. Tell us a little bit about maybe some of the concerns that teachers and parents had for return to school and how you all landed with starting the first 9 weeks virtually.
Yes. This is probably when we started getting waves of emails and calls and letters on this. Probably started mid June to early July and didn't stop and for about another month. People were really, informing us on both sides of the issues, whether we should go to school or go virtual. And for us as decision makers, at least, at this point, I'm speaking for myself, safety was above all. And that was safety for the students, for the teachers, and ultimately the entire community. And I know that we as board members, we reviewed a ton of information that we got from the public, from the superintendent to make the decision. And, we had a lot of different input as to the impact of, what virtual education, the long-term impacts of that will do. But for me, ultimately, the decision came down to safety. And I had to really weigh that I know that maybe virtual education may not be the best for the majority of our students at this time, but I had to think about the safety. And when it all came out, I felt that September the 8th was not going to be time for us to bring back the students in person when we were in the height of making this decision. The numbers were going up not only in the country, but in this area as well. I think it's kind of leveled off now, but we we just felt that at the time we could not bring the students back in the schools to teach in person.
LaTishia, what about you all? I know that you're a principal in the Albemarle County school system, but tell me a little bit maybe about some of the meetings that you all had around bringing the kids back to school.
I believe with the county, the process was very similar to that of Charlottesville City Schools. The county created a set of stages and kind of defined at each stage who would be able to return to school, so that it would create a kind of a continuum of how we could provide for in-person learning experiences for our students and balance safety for students and staff members. And based on all of the data they were receiving surrounding the coronavirus, as well as feedback from the communities, they landed on beginning at what we a stage 2, which basically is mostly virtual learning for the majority of learners. However, it does provide for some in-person learning experiences for students that have very severe needs related to either special education, not having access to internet in their homes, or being English language learners. So students in each of those groups, there are specific students in each of those groups that do have opportunities and will be in person beginning September the 8th, but the majority of students will be beginning at home with virtual learning. And then the county decided that midway through, so they made that decision for the first 9 weeks, and midway through the first 9-week period, they will reevaluate and then determine what stage we will proceed to in the following 9-week period.
Okay. So you just brought up a really good question that I was actually going to ask about, some of our most vulnerable students, right? Kids with IEPs, or, the kids who really need that in-person instruction. You mentioned, having those needs. How are those needs, I guess, determined and established when it comes to the kids that need to be in school?
Right. I mean, it was very challenging. I mean, I'm at the elementary level. And so, I believe every student, the best place is to be in school, because, that's where our youngest learners are. They're still developing in many ways. And so for special education, our special education department developed some very specific criteria that they looked at the needs of the students to see which students they could provide services for in a virtual environment and which students really required being in person. And then as far as students who didn't have access, they really worked hard to create equity, because that was definitely a challenge in the spring. We already knew that, many of our students didn't have access, but the turnaround was so quick that we couldn't quite address it as well as we would have liked. But I feel like the county's done a really good job in kind of working with families around that. And that includes either providing the service for families that can't, have this, they can't purchase the services or get the services on their own, as long as they're in an area where the services are available otherwise. And for families that have limited or inconsistent access, they are providing hotspots for those families. And then students that can't get access and a hotspot will not work, then those students do have opportunities to work in school buildings so that they can access the virtual environment from the school building. And then the same for our English language learners. Our ESOL department worked really hard to determine which students really, it's hard again, because, all students, we feel like, best benefit from in-person learning, but they really work to kind of create some kind of criteria that would allow them to determine which students would begin in the building in this stage of phase 2. And so at my level, those happen to be students who are already in kind of the upper elementary grades, but still at a very low level of English acquisition. And so those are kind of the ways that they are working to meet the needs of some of those most vulnerable groups that we know exist in our schools.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in to, for what some of the things that the city is doing to address that population in special education, case managers. They're working with parents to learn what additional support the students are and they're going to need during the virtual learning process. Additionally, the IEP, which is an independent education plan, they're going to be teams. They're going to be working with the parents to consider, whether or how in-person interventions will take place, and that's going to be done on a case-by-case basis, working with the family. And these conversations have already been going on. They're underway now to see how this will look. The IEP teams also, they're going to be able to consider the frequency and the duration of those meetings. It could be for 30 minutes, it could be an hour, it could be 2. It's definitely not going to be, considered, we know that it's not what they typically will get. The parents, still won't be able to go to work if that's what they had been doing. We wish we could do more. We're trying to fill in the gaps, where we can. But we want the parents, if they're listening, to reach out to their case manager, reach out to the schools to let us know what additional supports that they need. And here, just a couple of examples of some things that we're doing. We're providing some tubs with a lot of different appropriate level activities in there. We're giving high and low tech, assertive technology. And these are some terminology and some things that our staff have been using and doing for years, but I'm really learning now. We're going to schedule visual and social stories that we can share with them. We're going to be doing additional meetings with case managers and families in cases where we need to. And we're going to be distributing even more tools and accommodations that they're going to need. So these are just some examples of some things that we're doing. The bottom line is that we're working with the families of those in most need in this population to address their needs. Everyone in my sense, we're just trying to just kind of hold what we got until we can get back to school in person. It's not ideal, but we're doing everything that we can.
Thank you. Shawn, I want to shift over to you because I would love for you to maybe take a couple minutes and, give us a little bit of background about what your firm does and how you are kind of involved in some of this work with the community, with the school system.
Sure. So, the K-12 studio at VMDO, as I said before, we design pre-K through 12th grade learning environments. And we are actually under contract, although kind of awaiting the project if the project is on hold because of COVID right now. But, we won the CCS reconfiguration project. So that's the kind of Walker-Buford sites and really looking at the K through 4th and 5th grade and how the schools are going to change in the future. There's a tremendous equity opportunity to address long-standing racial inequities in the way education has been parsed out in our community, in our country, but to really involve the community in a conversation around how do we provide, as Juan was saying, how do we know that each family is getting the service that they need, each student is able to thrive to their best of their abilities, and how do we as architects and we as a community create the kind of full wraparound services, both that the school can provide, but then the after hours care, the before hours care, the family support that's necessary to really make sure that families and students are supported through this really difficult time. And something that I said, when we had our kind of planning call, and that I'll say until I'm blue in the face, is that one of the main goals of my involvement right now in this project is to increase awareness, to kind of raise the thermostat a little bit on this issue. I believe that right now we are looking at a massive and looming equity crisis. I think our country is having a deep detailed and really probing conversation about the history of race and racism in our society and the effects that it's had on individuals and their families and on communities. And what is rolling down the pipe, not because any school system wants it to happen, not because any educator wants it to happen, but because there was a public health emergency that wasn't dealt with, that has become a public health crisis, that has now become an economic crisis, a health crisis, a housing crisis, and this fall, it's going to become an education crisis. And the students in our education system will never get this time back. Their minds are ready to learn. If they are third graders, they are ready to face third grade challenges. If they're fourth graders, fourth grade challenges, they will learn, they will get everything that the schools can give them. And I know the schools have been doing heroic and tremendous work, but I truly believe that this community and every community in our country has to rally around behind them to fill in the gaps, to find out what the opportunities are, to ask how they can help. And we have to have a really open and honest conversation, how to provide safe, consistent, reliable support for students, not just for education, but for their social emotional well-being. You know, kids are perceptive, they're smart, they can see through BS, you can't kid them, you know, they know exactly what's happening, they are feeling the pressure and the challenge of this time, and it will manifest. And if you don't get the social emotional component right, they can't get their educational attainment right either. You have to have a balance of these things. So what I've been doing personally, you know, I'm a full-time architect. I'm a dad of a CCS student. My daughter's at Burnley Moran. I've got 2 younger kids, but I've been basically trying to bring everybody I know in the community together, from UVA, the Equity Center, the Curry School of Education, to City of Promise and Monticello and Boys and Girls Club and the YMCA, and make sure that everybody's talking about what they've got and what they need, what the schools have and what they need, and how the community can really rally to fill in the gaps. So, you know, I'm hoping to, although there are challenges, help bring citizens of our community to bear on this problem, to become assets that schools can deploy to help educate kids. So we're trying to build a civilian education corps. We're looking for volunteers and support and connections and ways to help break some complicated log jams that exist from kind of the Department of Education and using volunteers versus using paid staff and access to kids, all of which are really important issues. But I think we need to balance these things, as Juan was saying, around safety, right? Our physical safety, but also the long-term effects of not having kids in classrooms. You know, the best possible educational environment for them is one-on-one. The next best thing is in a small group focused educational environment. And if kids can't go to school, their parents can't go to work, right? So this is an economic problem. This is an educational problem. And the inequity is going to fall primarily on, you know, more heavily on people of color and on women. So yeah. I think this is a chance that we have to really look at this issue hard and address as a community how committed we are to providing an equitable solution in this time.
Totally agree. Tisha, you and Juan both mentioned that you guys are going to kind of reevaluate halfway through the first 9 weeks. And so for me, as a parent, selfishly, you know, has there been any conversation about, okay, we're going to go the next 9 weeks virtual, or we're going to go the rest of the year virtual? How far out have you all had some conversations around, you know, pulling that trigger and making those decisions, you know, so that people can plan accordingly, whatever that looks like?
I'll go ahead and chime in, LaTishia, because, you know, I want to be honest. I'm gonna speak for myself. I don't know. You know, this. You know, we as a society, as a community, we just have not been able to, in my opinion, put our hands around this virus, and I don't know what it will look like. And you know, what we said we would do is that, you know, we made the decision for the first 9 weeks, and about 4 or 5 weeks in, we will look to see where things are, to make plans for the following 9 weeks, to give everyone time to plan. And I guess at this point, my decision will still be based on safety. If you know, and whatever that the environment looks like is with the vaccine or the virus at that time, that's what my decision will be made on. And I can't speak for other board members, but that's personally what I would do. I recall when at our last board meeting, it was a marathon, it was 6 hours, and I specifically asked Dr. Bonds about with the local health district, what are we to do if we were in session and a student I just said a third grade class, he or she came down with the virus. What are we to do? Who should get quarantined? And it's a lot of ifs, ands, and buts, but you know, under the right conditions or wrong conditions, everyone in our class theoretically could get quarantined, and that could just happen over and over again. As far as you know, after the 2 weeks, if it should happen again, and so it just didn't seem right to bring the students and the teachers to bring back and have the ability to be super spreaders with, you know, 20 to 25 kids in a class or whatever. And so for me, the decision would be based on safety.
And to follow up a little bit on that, Juan, and if you or LaTishia or Shawn want to chime in, what do you guys, you know, we all have different kind of thoughts about COVID, right? A lot of people think that it's not as bad as we're making it out to be. Some people, you know, are on that. I think Shawn spoke to the fact that parents need to go to work, right? I have had the luxury of working from home since this happened in March, but not everybody has that luxury, right? So if you're a parent who needs to go to work and you need to educate your kids, you know, how do we balance that? How do we take into concern the people who are saying it's not that bad, we need to get back to normal?
I'll say personally, this isn't ending anytime soon, in my opinion. I don't see any indicator that, you know, we're going to pull up out of this nosedive and everybody's going to go back and it's going to be fine. I think, you know, Leadership Charlottesville is full of people who want to be leaders in their community. I think as leaders, sometimes you have to kind of swallow the bitter pill and say, let's be prepared for the worst case scenario. And for me, the worst case scenario is every kid in Albemarle County schools and Charlottesville City schools is going to be learning from home for the year. So what do we need? How many kids need to be taught in those schools? How many kids need to have secondary places where they can go? And I know the YMCA and Boys and Girls Club and other, nonprofits are trying to stand up programs and grow their programs and use public spaces, but they're going to have, you know, somewhere between 200 and 700 slots. And Charlottesville City Schools has 4,500 students, and Albemarle County Schools has 13,500 or 14,000 students. So that, you know, the space we have to actually provide care in person for students is really, really small. And so we can't meet that need yet. And the challenge is, if we don't think about the fact, at least this is me speaking, if we don't think about the fact that this is going to be our position for a long time, and we don't just prepare the best possible solution for it, we're going to continue to have people in a kind of an occupational and educational limbo, or start and stop, which is what's happening in colleges. And I just think we need to be mindful of how complicated and expensive this is, right? I'm already paying for daycare that my kids may or may not use, right? I'm already paying for additional support for one daughter that may or may not happen. You know, this is hard, and I'm a very fortunate person to be able to do that. A lot of our friends and neighbors can't.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to mention. You mentioned the Boys and Girls Club and the YMCA, and those things are great. I know from a normal perspective in a normal year when it's not COVID, if you're trying to send your kid to summer camp, you know, I've checked into some camps around town that are, you know, $300 a week. And, you know, I mean, people can't afford that. We all live in Charlottesville. We know how expensive it is to live in Charlottesville, even when you have, you know, a really good job. So, you know, any idea on what those things might cost through the YMCA, or what type of support either the community can give, the state can give, anything like that?
Juan, I was wondering, did the Charlottesville City Schools, or LaTishia, you might know, did any of the school systems in our area take advantage of or apply for grants through the CARES Act because the CARES Act had provisions to provide money for tutoring services and additional services. I've read that Montgomery County did, in Montgomery County, Maryland, who I'm working with. I just didn't know if any of the local school systems did.
Well, I'll speak for Charlottesville. I know that we applied for everything that we could get. I know we got some money for meal distribution, and I could have been part of those same funds that we could have used for tutoring, and we already had, some funding, very robust funding for tutoring and interventions, that a lot of that money was shifted to provide extra computers, extra hotspots, and things like that. But I do know that the city of Charlottesville, in conjunction with the local government, applied for everything possible. And I just, I know for the county that I work for, Albemarle County, that I know that the county did as well, but I can't speak specifically for the schools.
The YMCA program is a sliding scale, based on income, and there are scholarships available. And I think the same goes for Boys and Girls Club. City of Promise, has, I think they serve somewhere in the neighborhood of 170 students, and I think they're looking to expand that slightly. So, the nonprofit community is responding, but there's also this challenge. If it's not safe for teachers to be in class with kids, how is it safe for the folks from the Boys and Girls Club and the Y? And then you have a challenge of people with either they themselves or one of their friends or neighbors or loved ones in their home also have a pre-existing condition that makes them, more susceptible to the downstream effects of COVID-19. And what I'm interested in is a conversation around how do we give people an opportunity to be a part of the solution who can't be present and in person. Because even when the schools get open, Juan, I believe that they'll come back. Even when Boys and Girls Club are operating, when a kid gets sick, that at least that class will shut down, or that wing will shut down, or whatever. Like, we're going to be in a kind of a rolling start and stop. So we're going to need a long distance solution long term. And my hope is that if Charlottesville stands something like this up, it could be a solution to help bridge the equity gap long term. This need existed before COVID-19, and it'll exist after it, because the schools are going to be understaffed, underfunded, because people are pulling their kids out of public schools, right? And so and tax revenues are down. So, as leaders in this community, we need to really think. We are asking one of the most disinvested systems in our society, in the democracy. Public schools have been underfunded for years. Their funding has been slashed and eliminated and shrunk. And to ask them to provide food service and hotspots and computers and virtual and in-person instruction to heal the kind of wounds and effects of this, to get people back to work, it's magical thinking,
So yeah, Shawn, we had started, as you know, to have those really difficult conversation on equity in the city of Charlottesville. It's a city of 10 square miles, and then literally in one classroom in one school, we could have, we have one school that's pulling from the highest concentration of wealth in the city of Charlottesville, and in that same school pulling from the highest concentration of poverty. And it's difficult, but I think that it's a great opportunity there. But it also magnifies what's happening in our community. And we have seen, since we have decided to go virtual, that a lot of families say, that is not working for my child. But they said, we're going to get together with some other parents, hire a retired teacher or a teacher or whatever to teach their children. And that is part of the equity issues that we're talking about. We wish we could do that for all of the students, but a lot of parents just can't do that. And you're right, this could be an opportunity we use as a society to try to address these inequities. But I think that maybe some of us are ready for this conversation in our society, but as we see things that's happening across the nation, a lot of society is just not ready to handle this, to have this difficult, or should we say courageous conversation, on a national basis.
Yeah. For you guys, I don't know, some of you are my friends on Facebook and not, but today at work, we had Ibram Kendi, who is the New York bestselling author of How to Be an Anti-Racist. right? We had a webinar with him today. And you mentioned, Juan, education, I think Shawn mentioned it too. It's just one more of those things, right? When we're talking about the systems that we have in place, it's all of these things kind of compounded. And I think we're seeing it. Shawn, you mentioned it, right? That we're seeing kind of all of these crises come together at the same time. So we need to do something. We do have some questions coming in, LaTishia. So I wanted to touch base with you. I know that there's a question here from someone who says that they run a parent group for Albemarle County students, elementary school students. And the biggest comment that they're getting is not getting enough information about the first 9 weeks. Do you have any resources or any thoughts on how people can get additional information? And I'll kind of preface that because I know I have a lot of conversations with people. People sometimes, I know schools, different school districts have Facebook pages. Not everybody's on Facebook, right? They have email. Not everybody's on email. So what kind of ways are you guys communicating with people, and what can people do if maybe they're not receiving information?
Yeah, I would say definitely to, advise, encourage parents to contact their school and let them know, they feel like I would say that first and foremost. I know that everyone is busily planning for the upcoming school year, but we definitely want to make sure people are informed and feeling good about the start of the school year. I know that hopefully you'll begin to hear something different, even if you were hearing that initially, because now I think schools are to the point where information is coming out probably rapidly for families. Teachers, like there was a lot of work being done over the summer because the decision, was made, not too long ago that we were going to begin school in a mostly, virtual setting for most kids. And so there was a lot of preparation that divisions and schools were doing. And at the same time, teachers technically weren't at work during that time. And so while a lot of teachers did participate over the summer months in that preparation, teachers officially came back to school just last week. And so there was a lot of information to be shared, a lot of professional development to be done. And some of the things that we had worked on as a division over the summer that even though lots of teachers and staff participated in, still had to be communicated to the staff for all the schools. And then changes were made, and we really wanted to make sure, I can speak for us that, the information that we do put out to parents is information that will be, efficient and usable, and not something that's going to be changing, because I know during this time, people are feeling like things are changing. They're trying to, make family schedules. They're trying to think about their, how they're going to do, have their kids at home and balance work. And so, we really want to make sure that the information parents do receive is the information they can count on and have, and create effective plans for their family. And so with that said, teachers are now communicating individually, lots of schools, including ours, are doing virtual home visits with families so that they can connect individually with families and, with students to share out what the school days are going to look like, to share out kind of what expectations families can have. And schools have also been holding community meetings. So for example, I've held several community meetings with my specific school community where it was open to families to attend and ask questions and get information about the upcoming school year. And then we've had several smaller meetings with some of our some of our kind of internal communities, such as our community of families that don't speak English and things like that, and just making sure that we're connecting with the various communities within each school as well, so that families can feel informed. So I would say that definitely the first thing I would advise your group is to contact the school if they're feeling like there's something they're lacking information about. And then also just make sure that they're connected to like whatever, I mean, because for me, like with those meetings, it is kind of like Natasha was saying, like making sure that even though we're holding those meetings and doing those things, that people know that's happening. So, you know, posting on like our website, posting on our Facebook page, posting on like our Twitter account, and sending out blasts to our school community are all ways that we communicate that out. But, you know, families need to make sure that they're connected so that they are hearing about those things so that they can attend and get the information.
Thanks, Tisha. I want to ask you all, how can we support our teachers, our students going back to school? It's a tough situation for everybody, but what do you need from us? What do you need from your communities? What do you need from parents? How can we support you all as you make this transition?
So this is Juan Wade. I'm going to chime in because I had some ideas, but I checked with the schools and asked them, you know, what they needed, what they could use from parents or the public to assist. And I was told three things. One, school supplies. Even though we're virtual, the students will still need supplies, and hopefully we'll get back in person and they will be able to use those supplies. So if you have supplies, you can take them to the annex, which is at Charlottesville High School, kind of down by the baseball field. We could use that. The second thing is that we could use volunteers to distribute meals. For the first 9 weeks of school, there's various slots you can fill in, and that has been well organized. That is another way that you can assist. The third thing is that we have established a donation reopening fund with the local PTOs and the schools, and that has been up and going for about a week. And all this information is on our website. So it's those three things: school supplies, volunteers to help distribute meals, and donate to the reopening school funds, which organized through the PTOs. Okay.
What about grace? Y'all need any grace? Y'all need any grace so that when you're making these decisions, sometimes you're gonna get it wrong, but you need some grace, or no, you good?
Definitely need grace. Definitely.
Definitely.
Shawn?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that for me, there are three things that people in this community, the LC community, can do. I think you can create pressure. Let people that you know who are in your circle, who are in positions of leadership, know that this is a crisis, and let's treat this like an emergency. Our kids deserve it, and they deserve the best we can possibly give them. And we need to be fierce fighters for them. Many of them lost a lot of ground in the spring. They will lose much more ground in the fall, and some of these kids will not make it back. And this will haunt them for their lives. And if any of our kids fail and fall behind, our society loses whatever contribution they could have given us. So it's not someone else's kids, it's our kids, right? It's all of us that will suffer if we don't respond to this. So create pressure. The second for me is help the helpers. Connect to your favorite local nonprofit, the folks that you know and love, or the organizations that have good relationships with the school. Right now, primarily that's YMCA, Boys and Girls Club, Big Brothers Big Sisters. They are doing monumental work to try and make this happen. They need to staff up, and they're having a hard time finding people who want to step into those classrooms. So if you know anybody that wants to be an educator, that's looking for some work and looking for an opportunity to give back and deal with equity, send them to YMCA and Boys and Girls Club, right? They are trying to fill their ranks to try and meet this need. But as Juan was saying, I think he led by example. Ask your local teachers, ask your neighborhood principal, ask anyone you know in the school system or in the school board, and then grab an oar, get in the fight at the neighborhood level, help your church if they're doing something, your faith community, your, civic community, whatever you can do, and shake the tree get donations, materials, supplies. Every kid, it has to have individual sets of materials and supplies. It's already hard to get enough supplies for school classrooms now. I know we always buy 2 or 3 extra sets every year for my daughter's classrooms. If everybody can pitch in, each school has a K-4 list and a 5th, 6th, 8th list. Grab a couple, order them and deliver them, as Juan said. Anything we can do to help. And the last thing for the folks in Leadership Charlottesville, the principal at Burnley Moran Elementary and Walker both told me that at least the elementary kids have what's called den time. It's an hour of sort of not academic programming. It's kind of supplemental information. I used to lead a group that did an architecture in schools program and would kind of fill that den time for an hour or so. That gives a little bit of a break for the teachers and their staff to program something. So the kids from the Curry School, the YSI students are working with teachers in the Charlottesville City School systems to program den time. But if you are passionate about your profession and what you do, or passionate about some activity that you have and you think it could be educational to kids, you can certainly email me, or you can reach out to teachers in the school system. They're looking for people to provide content for den time. So if you've got a presentation about what it's like to be a lawyer, or to be an engineer, or to work through contracts, or to be to make videos, to be a production assistant, whatever it is that you do, it could be really interesting for kids. So just think about trying to donate some of your time to help.
Shawn, were you also doing something to try to get some things going on in the community? I remember getting an email from you that you were spearheading a project.
Yeah, so I'm starting a program that will either stand on its own or might get consumed by one of these organizations, because it might be a little simpler for the schools and for the system now. But I am looking for volunteers. I'm looking to pair 2 needs, as feed 2 birds with 1 cracker, as a friend of mine likes to say. There's a lot of people who can't get out in society because it's not safe for them. There's a lot of folks who have to be home to protect themselves and those that they love. We have a large retired community that with massive experience, often in education and in service. And I'm trying to pair those folks with students and their families to create a kind of a virtual tutoring core. So if you're interested in joining that core, or you're interested and somebody who can help, please, they can email me. It's mulligan@vmdo.com, and I will put them in the hopper, and we're basically working through the mechanisms to figure out how to make this happen.
Thanks so much. Yep. I'm going to put your information in the chat here. vmdo.org or .com?
.com.
2 L's, right? Mulligan with 2 L's, yes.
I'll just chime in real quick about how to support the schools. I agree with what Juandiego and Shawn said. Definitely school supplies. In the virtual learning environment, different supplies are becoming a kind of a hot commodity, or that weren't necessarily as important in the past as like headsets or dry erase boards and dry erase markers, like different tools that will help support kids during the virtual learning environment. And then also I would just say, communicate with this school, but if you would like to participate with the school, but also I would say have patience. I feel like right now, schools are really doing a lot, working very hard. Teachers are and administrators are at the school level to prepare for students coming to school and really trying to create the best and most engaging and robust learning experiences for kids, given the circumstances. So I feel like, at this moment, if someone told me that they want to support in a way other than like school supplies or something, then I might have to take a minute to figure out how best to use that support. But I feel like once we are able to get going and get comfortable, then I feel like schools will definitely be able to utilize, the human resources and people that are willing and wanting to connect better. So I would just say, along the lines of that grace, just having patience for everything to get going, and because we definitely want support from community and to connect and collaborate and partner with community members.
Thanks so much.
One thing I forgot to mention, sorry, the UVA Equity Center is building a community portal to try and connect needs and resources. And that's in connection with the schools, in connection with nonprofits, and then in connection with kind of individuals. And they're gonna, the goal is that they're they're like everyone else, they're standing this up. I think everybody can be patient and generous, but they're trying to create a clearinghouse for our community to be able to put this, we've got this thing, or we need 20 power strips for this outdoor learning classroom that's getting set up in this neighborhood to help all the folks there. So that's going to come into existence or be live soon, and then it will continue to grow. So I think keep an eye on the UVA Equity Center. They are doing a lot of important work around this issue and really trying to bring the resources and dollars that back UVA to bear on helping deal with equity in our community.
Thanks so much. We have a couple questions, but I want to make sure that we get to them. So there are two around IEP. So the first question is, how are you guys helping students who have an IEP that requires them to have an assistant normally, now that we're going to be doing some of the distance learning? And the other question, I think, is what's the plan to accommodate needs of students with special needs and their families? And I think someone might have touched on that a little bit, but if we can just maybe go back and talk a little bit about what we're doing around that.
Yeah, I'll speak for the city of Charlottesville. I think the county is probably doing the same thing. Is that we're talking to that family, to the parents of that student, and to find out, well, we know what the needs are, but under these conditions, find out how we can assist them in their home. And if we can do it virtually, we are doing more and more virtually with the student. But sometimes we're going to have to do face-to-face, and we may have to be there 20 minutes or an hour or 2 hours. We're going to work with that family to determine what that service would look like. And so we are addressing those families that are in most need, and still addressing the IEP the best that we can with under conditions that we have. We have not been able to hire assistants to go into the houses and homes and provide the 8 hours or 7 hours of service that they had when they were in schools, but we're doing the best that we can.
LaTishia, anything from Albemarle County or from maybe your schools, how they're supporting?
I mean, from a lot of that was handled from the division level, but I do believe it's very similar to what Juandiego stated. Our special education department has been contacting families directly and working with them around the specific needs of students as outlined in their individualized education plans. And for the students that still will be working in the virtual environment that have IEPs, then our special education teachers are connecting with those families to figure out how best to support the students in the virtual environment.
Thank you. I would say, if you know someone who maybe hasn't heard from their school and they have someone with an IEP or they have special needs, like LaTishia and Juan said, make sure you're reaching out to your child's school or to that child's school to make sure that, we provide the best we can for them, when they start moving back to school. Andrea, I don't think that there were any other questions in the Q&A or in the chat. So I wanted to just pause here for a moment and see if anybody, if anyone has any questions that maybe they didn't put in the chat or anything that you'd like to add to the conversation today.
Valerie added a comment, Valerie Palamountain, and I don't know if she wanted to expand on what is being offered through Kids College, if she's still on.
Yep,
I'm still here.
Valerie, okay.
Yeah, hi. My screen keeps freezing, so I'm not going to put my video on. But we're offering, most of it is going to be computers, Python programming, Minecraft, things like that. We're also doing some cooking classes every July, which should be fun for the kids. And then we're doing some free things. We're doing a book club, and we're doing maker space, so that kids can make a project, and all of that's free. And what we're trying to do is, what Shawn was saying earlier, we've got to do something about this equity. This is crazy. We've got so many resources, and it's not being distributed the way it needs to be. And with the school districts now looking more and more at how do we get kids online and getting hotspots available. So what we're hoping is that through Kids College, it could be more social. They can make friends with kids outside of their neighborhood, their community. With an online class, we've had kids from out of state taking classes over the summer. So it lets them expand their horizons a little bit. So enrollment starts September 1st, and the classes will start at the end of September.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Shawn, I wanted to ask you, because I know during our call earlier this week, you talked a little bit about the experience your daughter had with Freedom School over the summer. So maybe, if you can summarize that in a minute or a minute and a half,
Yep.
Just about the difference between maybe spring and summer with her.
Yeah, absolutely. So my daughter, like most kids in Charlottesville City Schools, was really thankful to have classes in the spring virtually and to be able to connect with their teachers. But because life was hard for myself and my wife as we were working and our other two young kids, she didn't get the attention and the kind of care that she needed. And it was really challenging. One teacher to 36 kids. So it was a struggle. And about 2 weeks after the school school year ended, she started Freedom School, which was a program run through the Curry School. It was staffed by first and second year students at UVA and run by Dr. Derek Aldridge and Dr. Johari Harris. And it was a night and day transformation for my daughter. The classes were about the same time. She was on 9 to 11:30. But she had one or two one-on-one meetings that were about an hour long with her teacher each week. There were classes for us as parents. So many of the parents of kids in the program would meet to learn how to advocate for your kids or how to build productive relationships with your primary caregiver. And they also had shared movie nights. And what I saw, the success of the program and what I understand from our conversation with LaTishia and Juandiego is that the school systems, I think, saw the success of that program and are modeling really similar, trying to get close to, a 1 to 10 ratio of teacher to student. So a small classroom, a small learning community, so that you can really build social emotional contacts, and then one-on-one follow-up afterwards. And what it did for my daughter was it connected her to some kids around some areas that she was really passionate about. They were collaborating virtually on poetry about Black Lives Matter and protests and how to support, first responders. And it was a truly beautiful thing to watch. And it made my household a much happier and more pleasant place. And it was really inspiring to me in this this push to try and use the assets of our community to recreate, use that model. We don't have to build something new. We have it right here. We have the expertise. We can stand something like that up and really support our kids. So,
yeah, I think, sometimes we get so used to how something has always been, right? Sometimes it's hard to do something different. We're all creatures of habit. And so as we are getting schedules, I got my daughter's schedule. She's a senior, so I'm not in her business while she's on the computer. But I did see that they have a block from about 2 to 4 every day where you can have time to connect with your teachers. And I think that is going to be valuable when it comes to really the one-on-one interaction that you're able to have. And so, I'm optimistic about all of the things that all of you educators have put in place. And how the community is going to, rally behind this and hopefully get our kids to where they need to be. I just wanted to.
Can I circle back to special ed? And I guess it's really, my question relates to the county a bit selfishly, if I'm being honest. And my understanding is that only special ed students who are in either the A-base or C-base program are eligible to be considered for in-person support right now. And so my question is really for parents with children who have an IEP but aren't A-base or C-based students, but clearly need in-person support. You know, if those parents have had an IEP team meeting with the school and the school has come back and said, in-person support is not an option for your child, it's only available for A-based and C-based students, then what do the parents do as far as next steps? I'm personally struggling to figure this out for myself, honestly.
I would say too, I mean, for the division, our special education department handled the majority of, well, all of the decisions regarding special education students who would be either in person or virtual. And they did that by kind of going through literally all of the programs that the county offers for special education students, and then considering individual student needs as well. So my school in particular, although I'm at a smaller elementary school, but my school specifically, I do not have any special education students who will be in person, but I do know that the various schools do across the county. I would advise you that if you feel like, you know, a student's needs are such that they require in-person support, that you contact the special education department so that they can talk about that specifically for the student that you're considering.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
I think part of the challenge of this time is that we all require in-person support. You know, we are not meant to be alone. We are not meant to be isolated. This is not the world that we evolved in. This is not the world that we've lived in. This is not the world that we need to be supported and cared for and nourished in the way that we need. And many small contacts make up the thing that is our life and our society. And you know, one of my big concerns is that we are rightfully focusing on the kids that have the most needs and the families that have the most pressing needs. And I am there for that. But there are so many other kids and they need more too. And it's going to be hard, you know, for their families to carry it on. And I appreciate that this is a once in a century time, right? And we're in a very challenging pandemic. But to me, this is the effect of this is what happens when leaders fail to rise to the challenge. And this is, and the problem isn't that we dropped the ball in January or February or March. The problem is that we haven't picked it up yet. And until we, as Juan said, until we get our hands around the virus, until we get our hands around this public health emergency, these other crises are going to continue to get worse. You know, government support and the $600 extra checks are gone. Consumer spending is tanking. You know, the effects are going to be profound. And I think we're all going to have a real spirit of generosity and grace and care for one another and for our community, and really figure out how we can help without overwhelming. Because I agree with LaTishia and Juan, the schools are, you know, they're up to here just trying to make it happen. So figuring out a way that we can have a productive conversation, and I think it's happening through groups like Candid, where they bring members of the school system in with members of UVA and that's the Charlottesville area nonprofits dedicated to youth development, right? You know, they're trying to focus the attention and resources, but the more we can all do to support them, the better.
Thanks so much. Juan, it looks like you're unmuted. Did you have something to add?
No, I think that they added, you know, they summed it up. I just want to say that this is a difficult time for us all, but if we all work together, we can get through this as stronger as a community. Yeah.
I appreciate all of you for taking time today. Thank you so much to our panelists. We appreciate you coming and talking to us. You know, shout out for next month. We have plans to continue our courageous conversations. Check us out. Make sure on Facebook, if you have access to that, you can get the replay. But next month, we're going to be talking about voting, right? We're going to be talking about that in light of the upcoming election and just some of the things that are going on. Also, there was a change, I believe, to the census. If you have not taken your census, please go online, complete your census. These are things that are important. We're talking a lot about these equity issues. but these numbers that we get this year are going to impact us for the next 10 years. So please encourage people to take the census. I know we have a lot of people who in your communities may be undocumented. All of these things, we need to make sure that we're encouraging them to continue to, put that information down. It's truly important that we, continue these conversations. So I appreciate all of you for joining us today. Andrea, did you have anything before we wrap up?
No, ma'am. Just on behalf of the chamber, thank you all for supporting LCAA and their efforts for these in very important conversations. Thank you all.
Thanks so much, guys. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you all. Good to see your faces.